I used to be a journalist, and I was walking through the hills of Nepal when I came across rows of villages which didn't have girls from the age of 15 to 45. This was about 20 years ago. And I was really surprised because these were villages which were far away from the road, and the women also had to walk 2 hours to fetch water. So where were all the girls? I began to ask all the villagers, the men who were sitting by the tea shops, the men who were gambling, the men who were walking around, that where are the women and girls? And each time I asked, a man looked down. He would look sheepish, some would giggle, some would get angry. And one of them answered. He said, "Don't you know, they all are in Bombay." And I thought, Bombay, that was 1400 kilometers away, and this village was even 2.5 hours away from the road, where women had to walk for hours to fetch firewood or water. I began to explore what was going on, and to my horror, I found that the slave trade still existed in our midst. There was a whole supply chain of human beings, of girls and women. There was the local village procurer who would go to parents and offer them a job in the cities for their daughters, marriage, sometimes even tell them, your daughter is starving and she'll be prostituted, but she'll have food and a bed. And these fathers would let their daughters go for as little as $50, sometimes 1,500 rupees, 3,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees. And these procurers would then go and take these girls to the cities of Kathmandu and Biratnagar, where they would collect together 4 or 5 girls and hand them over to a set of middlemen. From the middlemen, these middlemen would put these girls into buses and trucks and then take them to the borders of India and Nepal, where there were the Karap border guards. Wink, wink, nod, nod, the girls were taken across the border, and there were lodge keepers on the other side who would take over the girls from these middlemen, and the lodge keepers would keep these girls in these shabby lodges in small rooms with iron bars on the windows, where the girls were starved, beaten, told there was no way they could go back home, till their spirits were completely subjugated. And then they were handed over to another set of transporters who would put them in trains and buses and then take them to the brothels of Bombay, Calcutta, Delhi, where there would be pimps who would negotiate the price of these girls who were no more than 9, 10, 11 or 12, based on the skin color of the girl, based on the size of her breasts, based on her beauty, her age, whether she was a virgin or not. And they would pay these transporters, again, a little bit more, $100. So if the transporter had paid a $50 originally to the father, he would make only about $30 more for this girl. And then these girls were handed over to the pimps, who would hand them over to the brothel managers. And the brothel managers would keep these girls locked up in the brothels of Kamtipura, Sonagachi for 5 years. 4x4 rooms with iron bars on the window, where the girls were trotted out for 8 to 10 customers a night to be raped. And each customer would pay about 200 rupees, 300 rupees for the girl, sometimes just a few cents, after she was used up repeatedly. When the girls were virgins and their vaginas were tight and they were 9 or 10 years old, sometimes ice would be used to break these girls in. And I have met girls who were inside the brothels, who were like a kilometer away from Chowpatty, the beach in Bombay, but they had never seen the sea. And these girls were kept and used and recycled for 5 years, till they had no way of knowing where they came from. They forgot who they were, they forgot who their village was, who their parents were. All they knew was this was the life. And there they were forced to have children, so that their affection for their children would keep them in the brothels and they would not run away. They were seasoned inside the brothels, where they were told to call the brothel managers mamas and the pimp papa. And they were told that they were devalued because they had been sexually used and nobody would take them back home. They forgot that they even forgot that they had the possibility of trying to run away. And this is what I found when I was just asked the question, where are the girls? I ended up making a documentary on this because I was so outraged. As a journalist, I'd covered war, I'd covered famine, I'd covered hunger, I'd covered conflict. But I had never seen this level of exploitation of one human being by another human being. And I was really angry, as a woman, as a citizen of India, as a citizen of the world, that this kind of slave trade still existed in our midst, and I wanted to do something about it. So I made a documentary. It took me 18 months to make the documentary because I did not want to use any power structure to get inside the lives of the women, inside the villages where these girls were being taken away, seduced, tricked, forced, coerced, kidnapped, all kinds of things. And so when I tried to go into the villages in Nepal, there were the police who were in cahoots with the traffickers, some of whom were connected to the monarchy at that time. And we were not allowed to enter the villages. We tried to hire a helicopter to go into the villages. A helicopter would be refused permission to fly in there. But of course, as a persistent journalist, I still snuck in, and we still got some footage. The same thing happened in Bombay, where the pimps, the traffickers, the brothel managers tried to stop us. Somebody pulled out a knife on me inside the brothel and said that, why are you here? You cannot film this. But the reason I was able to make the documentary was that the women in prostitution had by then become friends with me, and they wanted to tell their story. They surrounded me, and they told this man that it is our story, and we want her to tell it. And we don't want what happened to us to happen to our daughters. We want a voice, and finally we think we are going to have this voice. And this was the result of endless conversations. There was a little tea store in Kamtipura in Falkland Street in Bombay where I used to sit waiting to find a contact inside the brothel. A woman who was a little bit older, who was not being controlled by the prostitution system and the pimp and the brothel manager as much as the younger girls. And sure enough, there were some women like that who began to talk to me and say, why are you here? And I would say, I'm a documentary filmmaker, I'm a journalist, I'm a woman, I'm outraged by what's happening to you, I want to tell your story. And they would say, why do you want to tell the story? I said, because storytelling can bring about change. And they would say, but why do you think that change is possible? And what change can do for us? And I said, the change can only make it better because you're in such a bad situation. And for all women, we have to help each other because we need change in all our lives. From the woman in the upper class family who is sometimes married off against her wishes, who has to please her husband and dumb down even after doing a fantastic college education, to the girl who's prostituted because her father says that I cannot afford a dowry for you. We have different structures of power and oppression which play out in our lives. So I said, as a woman who has education, as a woman who has a salary, I want to help the women who don't have a salary, who don't have an education, because we all have different levels of absence of choices in our life. And the women understood that, and they wanted to tell the story. So very bravely, 22 women in prostitution helped me make the documentary. I ended up winning an Emmy for the documentary for outstanding investigative journalism, but it was a life-changing experience for me because I had spent so much time talking to the women, making eye contact with them, that I began to feel journalism was irrelevant. I wanted to do more. So I gave up journalism, and with the 22 women in prostitution who had helped me make the documentary, I started Apne Aap Women Worldwide. Apne Aap, of course, means self-empowerment. And the reason we decided to call our organization Apne Aap was we believe that we can help ourselves by helping each other. And so we decided to form a small collective. And the women articulated the dreams in that collective 20 years ago when they said all they wanted was a job in an office without violence, a room of their own, where nobody would push them, kick them out, even if a customer had come in and said that they needed the bed for prostitution, and education for their daughters and for themselves, and legal protection both from the police and the prostitution system of clients, brothel managers, money lenders, brothel owners, traffickers, recruiters, all those who were trying to oppress them, beat them, extort money from them, take free sex from them, paid sex from them, rape them, not recognize their rape. And they said that is all they wanted. So with those dreams, we formed Apne Aap. And today, Apne Aap has reached out to more than 10,000 women. We have actually formed 150 such groups as the first one in Bombay. And women are organizing in these small groups of 10 to change their own lives, their daughters' lives, and also to change their communities and the communities in the states that they live in, the states in the country that they live in. And through the debate and the dialogue that they're launching, they're trying to change the world to understand that prostitution is a system which is based both on supply and demand. The supply is of girls and women who have absence of choices, who are not educated just like their brothers. They are pulled out of school to help at home, who are not given enough food as much as their brothers but asked to eat last. So they are malnourished and anemic, who sometimes are married off early because the father says that, later I will not be able to find a dowry for you. If not married, put into prostitution because he cannot afford a dowry, and he says, at least let me get her out of the house. And so they are raped in any which way. And then When they're stuck in prostitution, then they're chewed up and spit out of the brothel system and pushed onto the sidewalks as beggars, where they slowly die. And this was what I saw as absence of choices. And these were women who were from poor families, who were low caste, who were from the slums of urban India and small villages in rural India, who were from castes which were groomed into prostitution, like the Nat community where I organized in Bihar, who had been named a criminal tribe by the British just because the community refused to become daily wage workers, refused to settle down in one place because they were nomads, and refused and resisted the British in many other ways. And so the British decided that because they were not listening to them, let's call them a criminal tribe. India became independent. We removed the label of criminal tribes from such communities, but the branding and the stigma remained. And we began to call them habitual offenders. Until today, the men from this community are not given jobs because people say they will be thieves. And the women in the community are forced into prostitution and forced to put their daughters into prostitution intergenerationally. And when we started working in Bihar among such a community, the district magistrate in this community said, oh, nothing can change in this community. They are bad people. There's no point trying to start a school or a community center there. But we did, against all odds. And today that community center has become a symbol of hope. In the red light area where that community was segregated away to in the village of Forbesganj in Bihar, there were 72 home-based brothels. Today there are only 15 home-based brothels. And there are many homes there which have stuck a sign outside their home saying, we are not interested in prostitution, we are not a brothel, don't come to buy us. And the women have organized in groups of 10. They're accessing livelihoods, interloaning with each other, and starting small businesses from tea stalls to grocery stores. And they're changing their own lives and the lives of the community. But the one thing which also we realized was that while prostitution is a system which is based on supply, it's also a system which is based on demand. And the demand is formed of those who buy sex and those who make a profit of the sex. So one is the buyer of prostituted sex, the client or the John, and the other is the person who's making a profit of it, the money lender, the landlord, the brothel manager, the pimp, the recruiter, the transporter, or the whole chain, all of them making a money of the girls who they can prey upon in the different villages and slums of India. And we began to hold conferences with the women who we were organizing to have more choices. And the women told me that, Didi, you know, as long as a customer is there, as long as there is a customer, we will never be able to close down the prostitution system because there are enough poor people for the traffickers to prey upon. We start organizing in one village, they will go to another village. There are castes, Didi, who are being made sexually available to upper caste gangs because they are told this is their destiny. So we need to go after the buyers. And that is why Apne Aap Women Worldwide decided to work with the government to change the law on trafficking, an outmoded British law which had no punishments for the buyers, light punishments for the traffickers, the brothel owners, and punishments for the women so that they would not be out on the street soliciting in a public place. We decided this has to change. The victim should not be punished. It should be the perpetrator who's punished. After all, you know, rape is the rapist's fault, not the woman's fault. So then we decided to start campaigning, and we launched a campaign called Cool Men Don't Buy Sex, in which we've started a dialogue with men because we believe that it is an insult to most men when we say that men will be men and they will buy sex. Most men don't buy sex. And we want those men to come forward and join our campaign, which says, Cool Men Don't Buy Sex. Go online to our website, apneaap.org, to also sign this petition, which we will give to the President of India to change the law, where women are not arrested because they are there because of absence of choices. And those who are using them, profiting off them, selling their bodies, raping them are punished severely. And this is why I'm standing before you today, is to appeal to you and all those who listen to this talk online that support us to change the law and also to change the behavior of men who buy sex, because it's only very few men who are buying sex. It's not the majority who are buying sex. The 3 million women and girls who are trapped in the brothels of India today are not being bought by 3 million men. They are being bought perhaps by 30,000 men who are addicted to sexual domination but who are repeatedly buying these women and girls. They're not buying sex, they're buying sexual exploitation. And that is why Apne Aap Women Worldwide, my organization, which is a feminist organization, has launched this campaign. We are also organizing girls who are at risk to combating sex trafficking into groups of 10, because we believe, of course, that while we want to change the law, we want to make sure girls don't get put in harm's way, and more girls don't end up in prostitution. So what we are doing is forming Kishori Mandals, which is girls' groups in different villages, in different slums, so that these girls can resist the traffickers who are out to prey upon them. They have a little bit of political knowledge, a little bit of legal information, but also they're getting an education. We teach them karate so that they can defend themselves and defend their sisters who are trying to escape the seduction or the coercion of the traffickers, very often their relatives. And one girl who was there learned perhaps from another lawyer who came in solidarity to visit our village that why she was learning karate and why did karate change her life. And she said, Didi, I learned that self-defense means I have a self worth defending. And that is the knowledge that Apne Aap is trying to pass down to the hundreds of girls that we are organizing who are saying that prostitution is absence of choice and we have a right not to be prostituted. There is a debate going on in India which talks about the right to be prostituted, but surely women in India deserve the right not to be prostituted. We also want options which are viable, which are sustainable, which will give us a long life, and from where we can retire in dignity. We want to be rocket scientists, we want to be teachers, lawyers, doctors, and that is what the girls and women of Apne Aap are saying. It's been a long journey. It's taken 20 years for us to even try to get our voices into the public domain. We are still trying to convince the government of India to change the law, and this is one of the most invisible issues that the government of India has not tackled as yet. And I sometimes feel that if 3 million men were being raped, then every night, 10 times a night, then would the law not change faster? Is it because this affects women that the law hasn't changed as yet? Is it because it affects low-caste women that the law hasn't changed as yet? Is it because it affects low-caste poor women and girls that the law hasn't changed as yet? And that is my question to all of society and to all of you. An appeal and a question.